On GB News, we're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching and listening to Friday Morning with Esther and Phil here on GB News. What have we got coming up on the show?
Well, I tell you, sick of strikes, are you, aren't you? Well, we'll be speaking to someone who certainly is, the owner of London's oldest family-owned restaurant, about how train strikes today are impacting his business.
And following comments made this week by Dame Joanna Lumley, we'll be asking, is victimhood the new fashion for women? Is Meghan an example of that? We'll be discussing her and Harry later too.
Don't we just love Joanna Lumley says what everybody's thinking.
More than Meghan, anyway.
And we want to hear from you this morning, so do get involved on GB News at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GB News. But before that, here's the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Esther, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. A fresh round of rail strikes is underway today after talks failed to resolve a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Members of the UK's biggest rail union, RMT, began their latest walkout at midnight and it'll last 48 hours. Services across the UK will be severely disrupted with no trains at all in some areas. Passengers are being urged not to travel unless absolutely necessary. 4 people are in a critical condition after a suspected crowd crush at a music venue in South London. Police were called to the Brixton O2 Academy last night following reports a large number of people were trying to force entry. The suspected crush happened during a concert by Nigerian Afrobeats singer Ashake. The Met Police say 8 people were taken to hospital. Labour's Andrew Weston has become the country's newest MP, winning the Stretford and Urmston by-election. The Trafford Council leader secured 69% of the votes, but with only a 25% turnout in South Manchester. Mr Weston claims the victory shows the British people are giving up on the Conservatives. That as the Prime Minister says he's working flat out to try and restore the power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland. Rishi Sunak's in Belfast, meeting Stormont's political leaders in his first visit as Prime Minister. He'll also promote the government's investment in shipbuilding in the city whilst he's there. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says there's likely to be an intensification of talks around the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Clear at the moment, given the limitations of their negotiating mandate, that we're just not in the space where a deal can be delivered that really addresses the fundamental issues, and that for us means restoring Northern Ireland's place within the UK internal market.
British retailers recorded a drop in sales last month. That's despite online discounts and Christmas shopping. The Office for National Statistics says the volume of sales went down by 0.4% last month. It follows a rise of 0.9% in October. The ONS says department stores did report an increase in sales, with the longer period of Black Friday offers helping. Well, retail expert Kate Hardcastle says the cost of living crisis is forcing consumers to change their shopping habits.
We've got so much fluidity out there. We've got a fickle consumer now who's shopping very much emotionally. They're not showing that same loyalty to the big brands. So no one can really rely on the sales coming through the door. It's down to the quality of goods, the value, service being a really important factor, and also inspiration, ideas. People still like the retail theatre in terms of the experience element. That's still proven popular despite the fact that people have been more watchful of their cash.
Ukraine claims Russia's planning a major ground offensive in the new year with a second attempt to take the capital, Kyiv. The country's defence ministers warned the attack could happen as early as January, suggesting Russia's been preparing 300,000 more troops. It comes after strikes overnight hit major cities across Ukraine, including Odessa in the south, Kharkiv in the north and the capital. So far, both sides have ruled out a Christmas truce and there are no talks to end the conflict. 10 people, including 5 children, have been killed in a fire at an apartment block in France. The blaze broke out in the early hours of this morning at a 7-storey building near the French city of Lyon. Local authorities say 180 firefighters were at the site. The French Interior Minister says the cause of the fire is still unknown. And at least 18 campers are dead and around 15 are still missing after a landslide in Malaysia. It happened on the outskirts of the capital, Kuala Lumpur, last night, destroying an organic farm with camping facilities. More than 90 people, including children, had been camped at the base. And Virgin Atlantic will operate the world's first net-zero transatlantic flight. It comes after the airline secured £1 million worth of government funding to fly a plane from London Heathrow to New York using sustainable aviation fuel. This type of fuel is expected to reduce carbon emissions by over 70% and is mostly made from waste of oil and fats. Remarkable. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Rhiannon. And we're delighted to say we're joined in the studio throughout the show by broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon and the director of the Academy of Ideas, Baroness Claire Fox. So we're causing chaos today in the studios with two Claires. So I'm going to call you Foxy, because that's probably easy, and I'll call you Muldoon, and then we'll know where we're going. Now, looking at all the papers today, there's two stories, isn't there? There's the Meghan story, there's the strike story. So the Sun puts it as the traitor and the dutiful. So let's see which side of the argument you are both on both these stories. Muldoon.
Right, I think Netflix has just won a cure for insomnia. Have you watched this stuff? I mean, all I see is two people who are clearly in love. He's besotted by her. She is an actress. Let's not, skirt around anything there. But honest to goodness, it sends me to sleep. It's wonderful. I'm really tired and I put it on and that's it.
Yeah, so you're not traitor or dutiful, you're just bored.
I'm just bored. And
6 hours of the stuff, it goes on and on and on.
It's not just that, it's the £88 million that they've been paid to send people to sleep and make accusations. Well, no, they know what they're doing.
So, Foxy, what side of the argument are you on?
I think it is completely correct that this is dull viewing because you do feel narcissism is the dominant feature and victimhood, which I know we're going to go on and discuss it in another moment. Well, I tell you what, Netflix must be delighted with the newspaper coverage because I've just gone through the papers and you do think, I think, treat this with a certain amount of contempt and ignore it, whereas, a lot of newspapers have got the first 10, 15 pages dedicated to them. If they're narcissists, they're going to be delighted. They'll moan it's negative coverage, but they're in the papers, aren't they?
And that's exactly the same thing that she tried to manipulate yesterday, was the tabloid journalism, face-to-face of the pictures of William and Kate and Harry and Meghan. And they were pinning each other off. I mean, that's the power not only of the media, but the whipping up of stories and whipping up of public opinion.
Well, I thought there was an element of comedy when it had Harry had got a text from his brother and we all had to look at the photos. He looked at the text, shocking, here it is, not what was the text.
And I wonder why did they have to spend so much on it? I'm sure they'd have done it for half the price. I'm sure they'd do it for 40 million.
We should have had you in to negotiate.
Yeah, you should have negotiated it, Phil. But did you ever watch Love Island? And when they got a text, I've got a text to everyone. It's.
Well, maybe that was it. Maybe it was just shocked.
Reality
TV
gone mad. But the personal tragedy, as we're coming up to Christmas, is there's some families that fall out. And it's always really horrible, isn't it?
All families.
No, but I mean, like that bit where you kind of irreconcilably never will talk to your brother or sister or whatever. It's always a bit at Christmas that you think, that's a bit sad. This is devastating, isn't it, for them as a family. As a royal story, it is just irritating because it's not as important as Harry and Meghan think it is.
Well.
Yeah.
And I just do think everyone's got to calm down now. So I think that actually the traitor bit on the Sun is not quite right because it overplays it. It makes it more important than it is.
Yeah.
His brother's falling out.
So now for the next one, because we'll talk about that a little bit later on with the royal correspondent and also a PR chap, and he might look into the PR in it as well. Strikes. Where are you on the strike action?
Are you in favour of the strikers?
Well, I was a big fan of Mick Lynch at the beginning. I did support the workers' right to withdraw their labour, and I think the unions in this country have got a very, very, very important role to play, especially for the working class in this country. But not only just the working class, any member of a union has, they've got that defence mechanism against the management as it's billed. However, I think the striking at the time they're choosing to strike is having a massive impact on families at Christmas and even in society. And also, moreover, restaurants and hospitality get 35% of their profits over this Christmas period. Nights out, company nights out are being cancelled because of the train strikes all over the country. And yes, the Scottish Nationalist Party have taken ScotRail to task, and they've got an agreement, which Steve Hadley this morning on GB News said he thought it was a bad deal. Wales as well. Am I in favour of the strikes? I do accept that it has to be done, but where is the government in this? They wouldn't be doing it if we had a strong government.
OK, and quickly, because we're going to talk about somebody who's having a devastating time with the strikes. Where are you, Foxy?
Yeah, I completely support strikes, so I'm not dissimilar. I mean, I support the right to strike. You could go through each and every one of them and quibble, But I do think that there's an attempt to say that because these strikes are causing inconvenience, we should have new legislation that stops strikes happening. I don't think that's the right approach at all. I am inconvenienced by these strikes like everyone else. They drive me mad. It's scary that if you got ill, you won't get seen. But to be honest with you, last week, if I got ill, I wouldn't get seen because the NHS was in such a mess. And that's a bit like with the rail strikes as well. I can't travel between the northwest and here the rest of the time. So
both of you seem to be going with our People's poll that said overall more people support the strikes than oppose them. That's our People's poll. 44% said they did. So it's not unanimous support, but it's more. However, the Ipsos Mori poll saying, but it's waning.
It's waning. I think that's
true. It's definitely waning. So, look, Christmas rail strikes have placed immense pressure on Britain's already struggling hospitality sector, who are facing a third year in a row of disrupted service over the lucrative holiday period.
Hotels, restaurants and pubs now expect more than a third of their bookings to be cancelled this month. Here to tell us more is the owner of London's oldest family-run restaurant, James Chiavarini. James, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So, how have the train and tube strikes affected your business?
Yeah, so good morning. So firstly, it's not just my business, it's every business in the hospitality sector at the moment, up and down the country, is suffering. Obviously, cancellations, no-shows, none of it helps. I mean, we're already in a precarious situation after last December, after Omicron, the December prior, let's not even go there. So this is the third December in a row, like you mentioned, where we're really struggling. And we need this to get us through January and February, which are always very lean months.
Poll and people in our studio here are saying that they sort of support the strikes, or more people support them than don't. What would be your message to the people going on strike and the people supporting the strike?
I think at the end of the day, there is some public support for the strike, and I think everybody is sympathetic for the workers, myself included. I'm not privy to the negotiations. I don't know whether what they've been offered is suitable or not in terms of a pay rise. All I can do is talk about how it affects my business, and more importantly, how it affects other members of the working class. So the hospitality industry has typically always been a blue-collar industry. There are plenty of people who work as waiters and kitchen porters and busboys and barmen who earn, I should imagine, considerably less than a train driver, and they're going to be negatively impacted with their wages. So the idea that you're, sticking it to the man and you're only, affecting the super rich and the billionaires is, I have to say, a little bit for the birds.
And your business, I mean, will you have then a tough year next year? Will you be able to survive? And you are the oldest family-owned restaurant in London.
Yes. Will we survive? I mean, that's the question that everybody's asking themselves going into this Christmas period. As bad as it is for us in West London, I know friends of mine who run businesses in the City of London where they have 3 restaurants, and out of 3 restaurants, they had 2 bookings between 3 restaurants. And bearing in mind that these are companies that employ 60, 70, 80, 90 people, big numbers, big levels of PAYE gets paid into the government, big levels of national insurance, big pension funds private pensions get paid in. And you think if these people let go, what's going to happen to the treasurer's coffers as well? In the time of a serious economic recession, we need more income and we need more work.
But when you've only got 2 people in your restaurant, do you close up? What do you do? I'm hearing restaurants aren't going to open all of January because there won't be the people. They can't afford the energy bills and the staff costs, so they won't be opening up. What will you be doing?
I'll be open. We're gonna fight this tooth and nail. We're going to be there every day, showing up to work regardless of who shows up and who doesn't. Yeah. We're in a lucky position that we've been there for 55 years, over several generations. So we have a good name, we have a good reputation, but we are a bit of an outlier. I don't want people to think that because we're okay, that the industry's okay. There's plenty of restaurants, plenty of pubs up and down the country that don't have the same level of goodwill that I'm very blessed to have with all the generations that came before me.
Claire.
James, I've got absolutely...
Foxy, I should say.
Yeah, I've got every sympathy. But one of the things that I've been thinking about hospitality is that for those of us who were really worried about what happened to hospitality during lockdown, and we felt that unnecessarily you were closed down, pubs were closed down, restaurants and all the rest of it in the panic that was lockdown, what I think has happened is that it's very difficult to kind of get the public to say, oh, it's all the strikers' fault, when we've actually had years of hospitality being treated badly. So I think everyone's particularly sympathetic to you, but also know that those people who are kind of complaining, like the government, when they say the strikers are ruining hospitality, you think, you've got a nerve. You spent 2 years ruining hospitality unnecessarily. And I think that's what confuses this situation. But I'm very sympathetic. Yeah, I think there's just a mixture. People just don't want to blame people defensively saying, I want a decent wage increase. I mean, as I say, I agree with you. I've got no idea how the negotiations are going or whether, in fact, you should take a deal or not. I just think that trying to isolate the strikers has been the big problem of broken Britain, when we all know broken Britain's caused by a lot else than that, and a government that's been rather dismissive of hospitality workers in the past.
I think confusion and I think upset, and that lockdown upset with bills, costs rising. I think there's been a lot that's gone into that. Muldoon, do you see that confusion there? People therefore don't know how... And maybe that's how the unions have managed to strike successfully, because they can say, well, actually, this is about getting the government out, and actually we can do it under the cover of all this confusion and upset.
Well, I hope that's not the driving force for this, because no government should be held to account to unions like this. And I think Sunak is completely showing a very weak hand. And I would rather they came out and gave a statement to say, look, this isn't working well. We've sat round the table. We have tried to, and it's just not working.
Well, James, who are you? I mean, do you think this is, are you confused, or are you blaming anybody in particular? The government? The strikers?
I think it's a catalogue of problems that go back absolutely years. I agree with both Foxy and Muldoon in that. I'm not saying that this is 100% strikers' fault. I'm just saying that this is literally just the last layer of 3 years of hardship that we now have to deal with, and it's just another horseman of the apocalypse that we have to fight. To be honest with you, if we were going into this fresh off the bat after 3 years of good economic prosperity, nobody would really mind so much, because at the end of the day, you're going into it, you're upbeat, you're positive, you've got money in the bank. The fact that you're going into it after 3 years of hardship, you're just emotionally, physically, financially, we're tired as an industry. And the idea that we've now got to face this as well, it just doesn't help the situation. I think...
It'll also affect your supplier chain as well, something that's sometimes often overlooked. You've got suppliers who want to supply you food, drinks and etc. Plus you've got the myriad of people who are in transient workforce at the moment trying to get some work, and they can't because either they've been penalised because they're on benefits, they can't work more than 2 days a week, or they can't get their freedom of labour movement either. So I think you're really caught between a rock and a really hard place. And the way forward, I would say, is more negotiation, open and honest chat with the government, and if the government would just inform the public, i.e. us, of what their view is going forward and how they can actually help. And it seems to me it's completely blame all the time.
James, as you can tell, you've got lots of sympathy in this room. We wish you all the very best over the festive period and beyond. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
So why don't we all go to James after the show then?
Well, we can't keep them all going. We can't keep them all going.
But we'll try.
But Claire,
we'll try.
I just thought that he made a very good point that, the Mick Lynch and people talk about they're standing up for the working classes. He's on about all the people who work in his pubs, restaurants, whatever. They're not much more working class than people who do that, and yet Mick Lynch and the people supporting the strike seem to have absolutely no concern whatsoever.
No, I mean, if you're a trade union... I mean, I was a trade union activist for many years. They don't have trade unions in the Outer Lords. But,
you started.
I should start one, yeah.
Maybe you
should. But it'd hardly be a working-class union, would it, there? But anyway... The point is, he doesn't claim to do that. He claims to stand up for his members.
No, he always claims to be standing up for the working class.
No, I know, but working...
He always says that.
I know, but I don't...
Well, you two can carry on this little Barney in the break, because we've got to go to the break.
Trade unions... I want people to not be begging and dependent on the government. And a trade union said, we're not begging, we're demanding, we want what we want. Fair dues as far as I'm concerned.
OK, well, coming up after the break, we're talking victimhood. Is that the new fashion for women? I bet you that'll get a fiery conversation going. We'll be looking at comments made this week by Joanna Lumley. So don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 10:24. Now, Dame Joanna Lumley has claimed that victimhood is the new fashion for women in a broad critique of the Me Too movement.
The actress said that in her early days in the entertainment industry, women took a tough approach to unwanted advances. But this has now all changed. Are modern women too sensitive about workplace harassment? Maybe, maybe not. Here to discuss more is Jean Hatchett. So, Jean, you know, in the past, women would have just said, you know, get a grip, you know, to the blokes who would have told them what to do, could have looked after themselves. Now, it's victimhood is the new fashion.
Obviously, I think that that's utter nonsense. What you've not got is victimhood. You've got actual victims. And, you know, women are accused sometimes of weaponising their trauma. Well, actually, I don't see it as weapons. It's wounds. And those wounds are inflicted by men. And I think she's coming from a very entitled bubble in some ways, Joanna Lumley, because, you know, this myth of a hand that can be knocked away it's really quite damaging, because can you knock away the hand of a man in your own home? You know, lots of rapes or sexual assaults happen to women in their own home. And so that's a much more difficult power dynamic. And, You know, the
And
idea that you can just
that's
knock
a sort of a
that
different.
off.
I mean, you know, I guess you're talking. There's a massive spread there. I mean, rape in your own home is very different to an unwanted advance that you can get away or slap down. But do you not see, in a way, there is? She's got a point that there is a way that women could be dealing with some of these forms of unwanted attention, or you know, you don't know it's unwanted until it is unwanted. Sometimes it could be wanted, and you're glad they've made that approach.
How do you know which one of those will escalate to the man who takes that very much further? If you slap his hand and he slaps you, you know, then you don't know which man is going to be the potential really serious threat to you when you confront that man. So, you know, I don't think this is not a sign of women being weak.
Nip it in the bud. You don't see anything with what Joanna Lumley said was correct.
No, I think it's really damaging what she's saying. I think it will discourage victims from reporting. And for example, I'm an old woman. I consider myself an old woman.
No,
I'm 56.
you're not.
But I'm nearly 60. Yeah, I'm 56. So I thought that I'd moved beyond that kind of realm. And I very rarely go into the city centre. Went into the city centre a few years ago now, maybe 3-4 years ago, and some men at the bar were tapping me on the shoulder. So I ignored it. I turned around. I said, enough. Eventually, after 4 or 5 times, I said, that's enough. Thank you. Enough. So I did the version of knocking the hand away. And the next time that I turned around, still waiting to be served, one of the men behind me reached underneath between my legs and grabbed me very roughly. I turned around and they were all laughing. So there wasn't one hand that I could have knocked away. And I did. And I felt humiliated. But, you know, it's not low level in that way, because that wasn't something I could do very much about.
Jean, I mean, nobody would want to condone or defend that kind of activity, but let's take another one that Joanna Lumley mentioned, which was wolf whistling. I mean, does anybody seriously think that anybody wolf whistling is going to lead on to some kind of serious sexual assault? And I suppose the point that she's making is you can either choose to be flattered by a wolf whistle or you can choose to be offended by it. Why do people have to choose to be offended by it?
I don't think it's a choosing to be offended, because I think it's part of a pattern, Philip, in honesty, in our society. And I think, you know, that kind of low-level stuff going right up to rapes, or, you know, being abducted by a policeman on the street and, you know, murdered. It all feeds into this same pattern of fear for women. So I think, you know, these tiny little isolated incidents form a bigger pattern of male violence against women that has to be tackled. And, you know, I'm going to say something you won't like, but...
Go on, say it.
Go on then. Just to wind Philip up, maybe. But one man raping has a benefit for all men, because that's influencing women and their way that they move around the world.
I can't believe it. I mean, that sounds outrageous. Where'd you get that from?
You're not. Let me explain. Okay, let me explain. So, if, for example, you're a good man, you don't rape women, but you are simultaneously benefiting from women going quiet because of the threat of male violence. So women who won't have the confidence to go around the world in the same way that you can as a man, you know, that is of benefit to you. That patriarchy benefits men. And so, yeah, you will condemn that man. But women are fearful of rape. Fearful.
Yeah,
it is the worst thing.
I mean, you can't seriously be suggesting that that a wolf whistle is the first step to that every rapist in every rapist playbook, that they all start off by wolf whistling at somebody. Surely you must accept that there's a world of difference between somebody on a building site giving a wolf whistle, which now is supposedly going to become a criminal offence, and somebody committing a serious sexual assault. Surely you must draw a distinction between those two things. You can't surely wrap them all up in the same stable.
Clearly, they're not in the same criminal stable. You know, they aren't in the same sort of level of criminal act, but they are part of that continuum of male violence that keeps women intimidated, keeps women from achieving the same things in society that men will. So, you know, this happens very young to women as well. My daughter walking past a building site when she was first in, oh gosh, would she be 11, 12? And some men did wolf whistle her. And she came home quite distraught, actually. She's like, why did that happen? I felt terrible. Is it because my skirt's too short? And that's the first time it starts to happen.
Jean, thanks. Let me bring in Foxy here about the wolf whistling, because Jean's taken a very bold anti-stance on everything here and doesn't seem to see the sort of a difference between one action and another. Where are you?
Yeah, Jean, I do disagree with you largely, because I've been for a long time worried about a kind of victim feminism that I actually think is disempowering. It doesn't help young women at all. And one of the things that, you know, I'm constantly reminded of, obviously historically, women had to be chaperoned to be protected from, you know, the evil stares and the evil wishes of men. You know, in the 19th century, women weren't allowed to show any of their leg. They had to have a male chaperone at all times. And it feels to me sometimes as though that's the kind of society that's being advocated, albeit that the kind of state and the law get in the way. I mean, I can't imagine anything more likely to sap the confidence of young women than telling them that a wolf whistle is the same trajectory as rape, or that catcalling, or as it were, unwanted approaches. I think that what we're doing is we're toxifying interpersonal relations. Young women, young men are unable to deal with each other because they're frightened of the kind of ways that things will be misinterpreted. Now, I have no trouble. I mean, I don't think that it's a question of a wolf whistle is a compliment. You know, it's been a while, as you can imagine, that I've had one. But it's also the case that when I had one, I didn't actually go, oh, wow. I actually I don't like catcalling, right? And the example you gave in the pub, these things are unpleasant. I do find them humiliating. I do want to tell the blokes to get off on one when they start that, right? But that's not to say that I think that means that I think that those people are about to rape me. I just think it's humiliating. That's different. And humiliation is something that I think that women should stand up against and say, don't you treat me like a piece of meat or whatever it is. But what we've got into a situation now is where we're scaring young women and they think that they are going to be under attack all the time. That's no good for them.
Now, look, we're going to have to go to the news, but Jean, you've certainly got us talking here. Jean Hatchett there with her views. Foxy's got opinions. We'll come back to Muldoon a little bit later on, but let's get your thoughts do email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, coming up, you couldn't make this up, but research revealed exclusively on this show shows that the government is paying over £200 million a year to organisations campaigning against its policies on getting tough with illegal immigration. We'll be joined by MP Lee Anderson to see what he makes of it. All that after your latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Good morning, it's 10:33, your top stories from the GB newsroom. A fresh round of rail strikes is underway today after talks failed to resolve a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Members of the UK's biggest rail union, RMT, have begun their latest walkout. It'll last 48 hours. Services across the UK will be severely disrupted, with no trains at all running in some areas. Passengers are being urged not to travel unless absolutely necessary. 4 people are in a critical condition after a suspected crowd crush at a music venue in South London. Police were called to the Brixton O2 Academy last night following reports a large number of people were trying to force entry. The Met Police says 8 people were taken to hospital. The Prime Minister says he's working flat out to try and restore the power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland. Rishi Sunak is in Belfast meeting Stormont's political leaders in his first visit as Prime Minister. Whilst there, he'll also promote the government's investment in shipbuilding in the city. British retailers recorded a drop in sales last month. That's despite online discounts and Christmas shopping. The Office for National Statistics says the volume of sales went down by 0.4% last month. That follows a rise of 0.9% in October. But they also say department stores did report an increase in sales, with a longer period of Black Friday offers helping. And hundreds of schools and sixth form colleges will soon receive funding to replace dilapidated classrooms. The Education Secretary says 500 sites will be given overhauls as part of their school rebuilding programme. Gillian Keegan says the rebuilds will be environmentally sustainable, with some schools receiving triple glazing, heat pumps and solar panels. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2146 and €1.1442. The price of gold is £1,464.27 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,385 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's nearly 20 to 11. Welcome back to the show. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Phil?
Yeah, well, Joanna Lumley's comments have certainly sparked some reaction. Chris said, I wasn't expecting this comment, I must say, Chris. Chris said, I'm nearly 70. When I was a teenager, the local vicar used to come into the pub and pinch our bums. We all used to laugh and call him a dirty old man. If you had a wolf whistle while walking down the street, we used to be quite chuffed. And Kathy actually agrees. She says, I used to love getting wolf whistles when I was young. Don't get any now. I'm in my 70s and can do with it. These women need to get a life. Lots of views on
Muldoon.
This. Well, look, I agree with what Joanna Lumley actually said, and I don't think for 1 minute she is normalising nor defending any form of serious, grave sexual assault. Don't think any of us actually will or ever will. But what I do agree with her mostly in is the fact that we as women, we're strong women. We don't need protection of the #MeToo movement. She's not talking about that. We had the Me Too movement years ago, and yet the serious allegations against women by men, i.e. rape, they're not increasing. These are rates that have been consistently high, but also I think the development of safe spaces or trigger warnings, or you can't do this, or trying to even introduce legislation not to catcall.
Well,
I think that's... No, sorry a minute. That will really endanger girls, young girls, of which I've got 3 daughters and 1 son, but I think it would minimise their risk, their ability to know what's not quite right. If it doesn't happen, it needs to happen for them to know what's right and what's wrong.
I want to put you what Susan said here. Susan says, I totally agree with Joanna Lumley. Women of her generation know how to deal with a pat on the bum. What Jean is talking about is sexual assault.
Yes.
Now, well, the point is I was going to make is that obviously a pat on the bum would be considered a sexual assault.
Yeah, but
so do you? I mean,
it's not in the same. You can't. I don't
draw a distinction between the two in the way that Susan does.
Of course I do, and I think Jean was remarkable. I think she looks amazing for 56 for a start. However, where I do take her to task is where she says that's the start of it.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and I think that's really damaging because I've got a son of 18. And it's very difficult for him to try and negotiate, you know, what's right and what's wrong if I fancy someone. You know, how do you approach someone? Yeah. And it's not about...
And it can be like a clumsy introduction.
Of course
it's not on a road to something which, as you say, is in a different league altogether.
The other difference thing, and I think that's a really important point, is social media now is where they get their validation. It's their form of catcalling now. If they put up these youngsters, if they put up a picture on the gram and they get a like for it or whatever, that's their validation.
I mean, to be fair,
that's their catcalling.
I was knocking Esther back for months and months and months, but I just eventually...
Oh, I see. I was the one catcalling, wolf bustling you, was it, Philip?
I just eventually caved in. Yeah. That was the easiest.
You didn't tell me I was a perv and go away. You just gave in.
I just gave in.
I think that the one of the things we were just discussing it in the break, but I think this is very important is actually we're robbing young women of learning the strategies that you need to deal with kind of unwanted advances, because one of the things that used to happen, and this is not like the good old days because there was a lot wrong, but there was something to be said for saying, oh, he's a dirty old man, or, you know, this person, and kind of knowing that and showing young women that, first of all, they won't be completely damaged by somebody you know, behaving inappropriately, and then get over it.
Yeah.
And also humiliating them and showing them up if that's the case.
Yep.
What now happens is that too many young women I talk to in schools and universities are literally scared of their own shadow.
Yeah.
They think that they're about to be pounced on at all times, and they can't make those distinctions, and that's going to keep them scared and at home.
And I think that victimhood isolates you as well.
Exactly.
So it's only happening to you, wherein, in fact, this, you know, perv or whatever, it's happening to all of you, and you can all be empowered by being a group together saying you need to check your behaviour.
It's not the girls' behaviour, because I think they, as Claire quite rightly said, they're being desensitised. They cannot manage that risk. They don't know when the risk is presenting now.
Yeah. And I think that's why we've got to be careful, by the way, those of us who are, you know, involved in politics. I mean, this law that's being brought in terms of catcalling really is very dangerous.
Yes.
Because what it does is it has a blanket ban on things. It's going to criminalise an awful lot of young men, by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
It's going to be used maliciously in some instances.
Have we got any more views on this, Phil?
Oh, sorry.
We've got lots of views on this, but I was going to say that on other things that people have mentioned, the strikes, of course, got a lot of people going as well. Not as much support for the strikes amongst our viewers, it would seem, as there is perhaps in the studio. Wendy said, I do not support the strike. Mick Lynch supports communism and with maximum destruction hopes to create social unrest and bring about a new communist state.
You've been watching Tom on the programme before, talking rubbish.
Joanna said, really, my heart bleeds for these poorly paid train drivers. Most people can only dream of such salaries. And Peter said, I used to work in the British car industry in the 70s and 80s. Unions killed the industry. They also killed the coal industry. People beware, it's all political, designed to bring the government down.
Well, we'll go to something completely different and then we'll come back for the ding-dong on that. But research revealed exclusively on the show shows the government is paying over £200 million to organisations campaigning against its policies on getting tough with illegal immigration.
Let's now welcome MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee. So, Lee, tell us more about this, about the government giving money to organisations campaigning against its own policies.
Well, there's not much to tell, really, Phil. It's just another lot of nonsense. We can see that currently we're spending £6 to £7 million a day housing illegal immigrants in this country. We're spending millions and millions more, you know, ferrying them over here, legal challenges, etc. And then, hey presto, the British taxpayer is stumping up once again to cough up over £200 million over the past 4 or 5 years to actually challenge our own government on these issues. It's absolute madness. You know, I read this report this week and I was absolutely stunned. You know, like you probably are, you two there. It's madness, Phil, Esther. You know where I stand on this. Taxpayers' money being frittered away on these lefty organisations which are challenging government at every opportunity. And you know what? We've seen more deaths in the channel this week. And I say that some of these organisations are complicit in this evil, vile trade that we see that's costing lives in the channel.
So, I mean, just to put some, this is research from Conservative Way Forward, I should say, and they say that the Refugee Council called the Rwanda scheme cruel and unworkable. They've got £27 million from the government. Migrant Help, 65 million. They've got a 235 million 10-year contract. Refugee Action said that the Rwanda policy was racist at its core. They got 17 million. People's History Museum, 3.6 million. Law Centres Network, 4.1 million. Bond said that sending people to Rwanda was shamefully cruel. They got £5.6 million. I mean, do you think it should be part of any contract, Lee, that the government gives out, that these organisations shouldn't criticise government policy if they're wanting government money?
Well, I'll tell you what, Phil, if it's a good point. If they did that, some of these chief execs would soon be crossing this off the agenda. Look, these organisations, Phil, which you've just spoke about, listed very well. These are part of a massive industry, and it starts with the people traffickers. It starts with the people traffickers. It starts with the when they get here onto our shores, they ferried off in buses to luxury hotels. So the hospitality industry is making a mint. Serco's making a mint. The lefty lawyers are making a mint. And then you see these so-called charities, these lefty charities, they're making a packet too from government. So it's a whole massive industry, which unfortunately is being paid for by the good people of Ashfield through their taxes. And you know where I stand on this. I've been probably one of the most vocal MPs in the House over the past 2 or 3 years on this subject. It's nonsense. It winds me up. We need to stop doing these do-gooders raking in hundreds of millions for these charities challenging our own government. You know, how did we get to this position, Phil? You're quite right. You know, if you're going to challenge our government, go and find your money from somewhere else. Go and ask the Labour Party for some money, or the unions.
And obviously, as the chair of the Blue Collar Conservative Group, the strike action, where do your sympathies lie here with all of the strikes that are happening at the moment?
Well, isn't it funny, Esther, that, you know, we've just come through probably one of the worst times of my lifetime with COVID, with the country being locked down, the government bailing out the country with millions, hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. Let's remember it's taxpayers' money. You know, we've got a massive debt to pay off. And what do the unions do? What they think it's a good idea now to hold the country to ransom. And you see these creatures like Mick Lynch. He thinks it's great. He's gloating. I tell you what, though, Esther, Phil, it's not costing him a single penny. He's not losing a day's wages. He's not missing that hospital appointment. He's not missing his kids getting to that important exams, what they might be doing in January. He's not missing out on anything. All he's doing is creating disruption, and he's spouting out the same left-wing nonsense every single day to try and bring this government down. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Lee Anderson, straight talking as ever, in the real world as ever. Thanks for joining us.
Muldoon, I was just thinking, I thought Lee made an interesting point about sort of a conflict of interest here, that in effect you've got people like Migrant Help, on this £235 million 10-year contract. They're responsible for running support services for people claiming asylum in accommodation. They've got a vested interest in this problem not being sorted out because they're making money out of this. Is this something that the government should be dealing with?
I can't actually get my head around this. So £200 million worth of taxpayers' money is being used to fund charities that are actually coming against government protocol. Why are we paying? Why do we have to pay the money? What are we paying the money for?
Well, it's an interesting question. What's your view?
Well, I think one of the trends has been that governments, all governments, but this government in particular, often outsource their kind of virtue signalling on these questions to third-party organisations.
What's the money for? Are they claiming compensation?
No, but they'll say we want to help, legitimate migrants. So they just basically give the money There's all sorts of grants given. It's the same in education. You can see
it's like a grant, it supports, they're paying them for various things.
And then there's services they provide and all that. The problem is that, I mean, this is an outrageous story. You're absolutely right, because it's one thing charities having opinions. They're allowed to have that, right? That's and they can be opposed to the government, and I think that's fine. But I think it's the cavalier way that governments almost try and buy their way out of a situation by handing the money over there, and then suddenly realising, oh my God, they hate us. And I thought that thing where you were saying they've almost got a vested interest is worth noting.
Well, we'll come back to that. And there are some contracts that government departments have, but you've got to be very careful that you can't curtail their beliefs. But there is something they wouldn't actively do something against the department. Anyway, we'll hear from you. But Britain is in the middle of a wind drought, and the timing couldn't be worse as the national grid buckles under the pressure from the Arctic cold snap.
Wind energy is producing just 4% of the power used by the grid at the moment, forcing the government to ramp up the use of gas plants. The lack of consistent energy supply raises the question, can we really rely on renewable energy?
Well, here to tell us more is writer and owner of the Bishop Hill blog, and that's Andrew Montford. So, wind farms. It seems that many politicians are blowing in the wind with this. We've seen Boris against them onshore. We've seen him now for them onshore. Is it the way forward, or people, don't they really know?
It's absolutely not the way forward. Wind, we've known for decades that the wind doesn't blow all the time, and actually, the Met Office reports that the wind speeds have been declining for a couple of decades as well. So they're getting less reliable. But for decades now, politicians have said that everything will be okay, that we're going to develop ways to store electricity so we can make more when the wind is blowing, and then we'll have a reserve when it isn't. It's just not true, though. If you look at the available technologies, there are batteries which are preposterously expensive. I mean, we're talking millions of pounds per household. I mean, ridiculous sums of money. Or there's hydrogen, which again is a pipe dream, because if you turn electricity, use it to make hydrogen, and then turn it back into electricity, you waste 2/3 of the energy along the way. So again, it just ends up ridiculously complicated. So what we've done is we've gone into a drive for net zero, essentially crossing our fingers and hoping that somebody will invent some way to store electricity. And at the moment, they haven't. Now, what's happening now, of course, is that the wind doesn't blow, and we don't have any other way to make electricity, because we have closed down all our coal-fired power stations, give or take one or two, and the gas is incredibly expensive. So we are on the brink of disaster, essentially.
Andrew, surely as technology gets better, though, surely there will be ways of storing surplus wind energy so it can be used when the wind isn't blowing. And some people would probably say, well, surely, that technology will come, and that ultimately wind energy will therefore be cheaper than the astronomical price of gas at the moment.
Well, there's two things to say. These are not new technologies. Batteries are not new. The best batteries that we have for grid scale electricity storage are very expensive and are not getting any cheaper. And hydrogen, again, is a mature technology. We've made hydrogen through electrolysis for a century. So again, we shouldn't have any expectation of any great breakthroughs there. I mean, it's possible, but you can't plan an electricity grid based on a hope that somebody's going to come up with something. That is extremely imprudent. You should be planning your system based on technologies that you have.
Andrew Montford, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. That's Andrew Montford, writer and owner of Bishop Hill blog. Thank you very much indeed.
I think what you were sort of saying there was hope over reality at the moment, people wanting to do the wind when it's expensive. And not only is it expensive, the actual wind farms are expensive to do, the concrete, the steel, everything about it, the batteries. Optimism over reality?
No, well, I think it's ideological over what's practical. What you need is a cheap, reliable source of energy. You're going to need experimentation, and that's why I'm excited about nuclear fusion. But he's absolutely right, isn't he? The clinging on to wind power as though it is the solution is entirely to do with the political decision to go for net zero as a target, rather than thinking, how can we provide the cheap, reliable source of energy for the British people?
Thank you. Right, what do you think? Let us know. Are you in keeping with us on that one? But coming up, parents no longer feel it's compulsory to send their kids to school every day. Can you believe that? They're thinking it's optional. We'll be speaking to former Children's Commissioner Anne Longfield.
And in the eye of the storm this week, Andrew Bridgen caused quite a stir with his attack on Big Pharma. We'll be asking him why.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update. A frosty Friday out there with snow falling across parts of Scotland. Most of England and Wales will be dry today, but it is cold once more. That is about to change. Here's the bigger picture. High pressure is actually moving in across the south, but these weather fronts have been providing a mixture of rain, sleet and snow across parts of Scotland and making for some treacherous conditions first thing this morning over parts of Scotland through the central belt. Snow falling for a time before turning back to rain as we go through the day. But we could see a fair few centimetres in some locations, certainly up over the mountains of western Scotland, several centimetres expected. Much of Northern Ireland dry, but some rain showers across the north. Most of England and Wales dry. Some fog around this morning as well. That will take a while to clear, but then plenty of sunshine. But temperatures yet again struggling to get much above 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. Now, wintry weather continues across parts of Scotland. More and more turning to rain at low levels, certainly, but more snow over the higher routes here, and everything could freeze up through this evening, so it may well turn icy. And we'll see a few more showers just drifting into southern Scotland, then northern England overnight. So again, it could be icy. It's going to be a cold evening if you're heading out tonight. Temperatures by morning, again, well below freezing across England and Wales. A little milder further north, where we'll have more cloud. But still some showers coming in, and we'll have those outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow over northern England and North Wales during Saturday. Again, most of the snow on the hills, but some is possible at lower levels. Mostly rain, though, at lower levels. Snow coming in across the Highlands of Scotland throughout Saturday, but much of eastern Scotland and much of the Midlands, South Wales, southern England, dry and fine during tomorrow. Temperatures a little higher, 4, 5, maybe 7 or 8 across the southwest, and milder areas on the way for Sunday. This area of low pressure is moving in. It's going to lift the temperatures, but it is also going to bring some wet weather, and we could see a spell of heavy snow. See the Met Office website for the warnings.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Good morning and welcome back to Friday Morning with Esther and Philip here on GB News. Coming up in our second hour.
Causing a stir in Parliament this week, Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen called for the government to immediately halt the use of mRNA vaccines. But why? He'll be joining us later in the show to explain all.
And we'll be joined by Philip Norman, who spent his life with the likes of Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Gaddafi even, and Liz Taylor. But now he's publishing his very own autobiography, and he joins us later to tell us more of his stories, I'd say, insight and stories.
But first, here are your latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Philip, thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Passengers travelling by train are being disrupted by a fresh round of strikes today. Members of the UK's biggest rail union, the RMT, have walked off the job for 48 hours after talks failed to resolve a dispute over pay and conditions. Services across the UK are severely disrupted, with no trains at all running in some areas. Passengers are being urged not to travel unless absolutely necessary. Union leader Mick Lynch says little progress has been made during negotiations.
We exchanged some ideas and some possibilities. There was no negotiation at that, and there's nothing arising tangible out of that. But what he did, having heard that as the facilitator, as they described themselves, and the people that ultimately own the purse strings, was he invited us and requested that we get together and hold further talks going forward. And we'll do that in the next period if the companies want to get engaged on it.
4 people are in a critical condition after a suspected crowd crush at a music venue in South London.
I've asked us to close the show. We apologise to you. This has nothing to do with us.
Police were called to the Brixton O2 Academy last night following reports a large number of people were trying to force their way into a concert. The suspected crush happened during a gig by Nigerian Afrobeat singer Asake. Met Police has launched an investigation and plans to review CCTV images of the incident. Labour's Andrew Weston has become the country's newest MP, winning the Stretford and Urmston by-election. The Traffic Council leader secured 69% of the votes, but with only a 25% turnout in South Manchester. Mr Weston claims the victory shows people are giving up on the Conservatives. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, says he's working flat out to try and restore the power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland. Rishi Sunak's in Belfast meeting Stormont's political leaders in his first visit as Prime Minister. Whilst there, he'll also promote the government's investment in shipbuilding in the city. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says there's likely to be an intensification of talks around the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Clear at the moment, given the limitations of their negotiating mandate, that we're just not in the space where a deal can be delivered that really addresses the fundamental issues, and that for us means restoring Northern Ireland's place within the UK internal market.
British retailers recorded a drop in sales last month despite online discounts and Christmas shopping. The Office for National Statistics says the volume of sales went down by 0.4%. It follows a rise of 0.9% in October. The ONS says department stores did report an increase in sales, with a longer period of Black Friday offers helping. Retail expert Kate Hardcastle says the cost of living crisis is forcing consumers to change their shopping habits.
We've got so much fluidity out there. We've got a fickle consumer now who's shopping very much emotionally. They're not showing that same loyalty to the big brands. So no one can really rely on the sales coming through the door. It's down to the quality of goods, the value, service being a really important factor, and also inspiration, ideas. People still like the retail theatre in terms of the experience element. It's still proven popular despite the fact that people have been more watchful of their cash.
Ukraine claims Russia's planning a major ground offensive in the new year with a second attempt to take the capital, Kyiv. The country's defence ministers warned the attack could happen as early as January, suggesting Russia's been preparing 300,000 more troops. It comes after strikes hit major cities across Ukraine, including Odessa in the south, Kharkiv in the north, and the capital. Kyiv says today's missile attack was one of the biggest since the start of the war. 10 people, including 5 children aged 3 to 15, have been killed in a fire at an apartment block in France. The blaze broke out in the early hours of this morning at a 7-storey building near the French city of Lyon. Local authorities say 180 firefighters were at the site. The French Interior Minister says the cause of the fire is not yet known. And Virgin Atlantic will operate the world's first net zero transatlantic flight. It comes after the airline secured £1 million worth of government funding to fly a plane from London Heathrow to New York using sustainable aviation fuel. Mostly made from waste oil and fats, it's expected to reduce carbon emissions by over 70%. The flight's likely to take place towards the end of next year. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Rihanna. We'll just read out a couple of your views here because these made us smile. Well, I've got this. Rob said, all I can say is I worked in bars in Brighton for many years, and when a hen party came into the bar, male workers got wolf whistles, got groped, sexual comments, but we took them as compliments. So it works both ways. Hen parties coming in with inflatable willies is commonplace, he says.
Well, and Linda says, I mean, there's been loads and loads of comments about what Joanna Lumley said about women too easily becoming victims. Linda said this: I was at work a few years ago explaining to the father of a pupil why his daughter had had her phone confiscated. He was very pleasant about it, and as he left, he turned at the door and winked at me. I was very pleased because he was attractive. I recounted this to a colleague, and a woman in the office said, oh my God, that's awful. Would you like to make a complaint? And Linda said to her, yes, I do want to make a complaint. I want to complain it doesn't happen often enough. Her colleague was quite shocked.
Oh, keep them coming in. They're certainly keeping us amused this morning. Now, something that isn't. The Chief Inspector of Ofsted has hit out at parents who treat schooling as optional following the pandemic disruptions as students' attendance numbers continue to plummet.
Some families no longer believe they have to send their children to school in person all the time and expect teachers to provide remote learning. Here to tell us more is Anne Longfield, the former Children's Commissioner for England. Anne, thank you for joining us. I mean, this is quite shocking. Were you as shocked and surprised about this as we were?
Well, I think what Amanda Spellman is saying is that she's really shining a light on the fact that there's a lot of children who haven't returned to school after the pandemic. And this is something that I worried would happen. There's about 100,000 children who aren't in every day. And the attendance rate has gone up or the non-attendance rate has gone up from about 5% to about 7%. Now, that doesn't sound much, but it is a lot of children. And it's a complicated picture of why they're not there. But it's an interesting discussion point on this social contract with school, because I think we actually broke the social contract with school during the pandemic when we left schools closed for so long and opened up Primark, theme parks, zoos, lots of other things before we got to schools. And for me, that was a huge shock. You know, I thought we'd all agreed schools are a good thing. You go, you get a good education. Everyone thinks that that's what the way life is. During the pandemic, that changed. And I think what we're seeing is not only the aftermath of that, but also the fact now, because kids were out of school for so long, actually mental health problems have soared. Many more children now have special educational needs being diagnosed. The aftermath is there to see. So it is complicated, but we have to get back to the point where we think school is important and we help kids to get there.
And you know, you're spot on. I mean, we read the Ofsted report after lockdown and how damning it was, how disruptive it had been and how devastating it had been for sort of the young pupils and children of this country. But I'm interested in this sort of a social contract with the family in school, that them thinking it's sort of a bit optional, or they were so used to it being so easy that they could just press a button and there it was down the line rather than going to school. I mean, is that laziness? Can we call it by another name? Laziness. You can't be bothered to get your kids up, ready and into school.
Well, you see, the parents I see are desperate to get their kids into school. They're saying, and have been actually, were throughout the pandemic, because most of them need to work. You know, if you need to work, you don't have the option of staying at home and having your children at home. So a lot of those children do have now quite severe anxiety, chronic anxiety for some of them. Children who were really, you know, very buoyant before lockdown are now in the position where they barely dare go out of the house. They're waiting for assessments, which take a long, long time. And there just isn't the support in school with special needs workers to give them the attention they need. Of course, there'll be some children who've given up on school because they think, you know, they didn't like it that much beforehand and they think it's done now. I'm sure there's some parents now and again that think that, you know, home learning might be a solution, but I think they're in the minority. I think actually most parents need their kids to be in school because they need to get out to work and they need their children to be progressing. And it's not just those that were struggling beforehand. Obviously, they're more likely to struggle. But these kids who were really buoyant before, suddenly not for six.
I mean, Anna, I think we all saw the damage that the lockdown did to children, whether it be educationally or socially, or, as you mentioned, mental health and just their confidence more generally. Yeah. We've got this COVID inquiry that's been set up to look into how, in future, we should respond to pandemics. I mean, are you giving evidence? Have you been asked to give evidence to that inquiry? Is this going to be taken seriously by that inquiry?
I think, you know, from the start, I and others have been concerned that children haven't really been in the spotlight for this inquiry. They weren't mentioned in the first terms of reference that were consulted on. There was a focus much more on institutions, schools, etc. Now, of course, that's important, but it's really important to look at individuals within there. And even now, we've had 2 modules that have been announced. Children aren't explicitly in there, and we don't know when they're and if they're going to come up. So I will give evidence. I'm not a core participant in that inquiry. Baroness Hiller has made choices to make other organisations, a lot of those statutory organisations, core participants. But I think the questions need to be asked about children, because some of this could be avoided last time. Some of it certainly can be avoided in the future. We just have to look at other countries. You know, in some European countries, they took over public buildings locally so that they could have more space and carry on educating. They brought in volunteers. You know, many things.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we definitely want you in that inquiry as a core participant. So thank you for joining us today. Now, Prince Harry accused his brother, Prince William, of screaming at him during crisis talks about the Sussexes' role within the royal family as part of the estranged couple's Netflix tell-all documentary.
The royal family has yet to release a statement in response to the claims, although royal insiders believe the relationship between the brothers may be broken beyond repair. Here to tell us more is our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, I mean, it is really like a soap opera, this thing at the moment. I mean, in terms of a public relations exercise, I mean, are Harry and Meghan playing a shrewd game, or is it suicidal public relations, which is what it appears to be to me?
I mean, you just have to look at every front page this morning. It's very much on the side of the Prince and Princess of Wales, the working members of the royal family, dominating coverage with the Carol service, the Westminster Abbey Carol service, and how the Netflix series, the final 3 episodes, have completely distracted from that. I think it was quite telling that Prince Harry has spoken quite so personally about his experience at that so-called Sandringham summit, where the negotiations was going on with the so-called divorce of Harry and Meghan as working members of the royal family. As you said in your link, William allegedly shouted and screamed at Prince Harry, which clearly Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have not responded to.
Do you think they will? Do you think they will respond? I mean, do you think they will respond at some point to these allegations, or are they just going to take it on the chin and let it ride?
So I have been told they are not going to be responding at all. I think perhaps if there was a specific allegation, then they might well have changed their mind and responded, like we saw following the Oprah interview. But it was a lot of allegations, lots of claims in this Netflix documentary, but there wasn't a lot of evidence to back it up, and I think that's what some people are struggling with.
And I was going to say, isn't everybody saying that? There was lots of insinuation. So he screamed. Was that meant to be he was bullied out of the royal family? So I think they haven't. And they might say, well, we don't care what Britain thinks. We care what America thinks. What does America think?
Well, America isn't quite as happy with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex as they were following the Oprah interview. In fact, the reviews of the Netflix documentary series have not been particularly positive. Even Gayle King, who is the CBS host, who is reportedly in talks to do a sit-down interview of Prince Harry to promote his book in January, wasn't that not happy, that's the wrong word, but she was a bit critical of the Netflix documentary. And Helen Lewis of The Atlantic, and I think this is a very significant quote, she wrote, "The relentless one-sided narrative makes you feel manipulated." So clearly there are two sides to this story, and this Netflix documentary only gave us one side.
They are the ultimate manipulators, and what I hear, and you could just say this is gossip, in Hollywood, people aren't necessarily open to their invitations because they're fearful that if they'll say this about their family, what will they say about them? Are they the next set of fodder? And when Oprah Winfrey, I wonder if she was surprised to see that she's named, that Oprah was stunned by how small their house was. She was shocked. I mean, they're just grabbing everybody, aren't they?
Yeah.
Any name to give them a story.
Well, perhaps. I think that's half the problem. I think if you take Will and Kate and Harry and Meghan as two separate kind of couples, you see a huge difference in how they deal with media attention and trying to increase media attention. So Will and Kate very much used their high profile to really champion and bring media coverage to causes that can actually make a difference to people's lives. Harry and Meghan, so far in the last 18 months since stepping back as working members of the royal family, seem to have a kind of a narrative of this victimhood, and it's going to be a big challenge for them going forward with more media appearances that they plan to do, trying to get out of that victim narrative and, you know, try and go on with their charity work if that's what they want to do.
I think the thing that's sad to me is that I always was under the impression that Harry and William were very close as brothers when they were growing up, and yet we seem now, it seems that Harry's riven with jealousy about his elder brother. I mean, at what point did this relationship break down? Because am I right in thinking they were very close when they were younger?
Yeah, it's very upsetting, I think, for royal insiders. I mean, you only have to look back to 1997 when two young boys were walking behind their mother's coffin in front of literally billions of people watching on television. They were very close. Prince Harry was part of the Royal Foundation, which now William and Kate are still very much part of. It's their charity work. I think perhaps tables started to turn when the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan, came into the fold. I don't think it's necessarily Meghan's fault that Harry left as a working member of the royal family. I think perhaps he wanted to step back from his role way before he met Meghan, but I think perhaps Meghan was certainly a catalyst in that.
As an onlooker, it seems to me that Harry and Meghan's egos were just too big and they didn't like the fact that they were going to have to play second fiddle. And that's just down to birth, isn't it? He was going to be the second son and not the king. And this is what they were doing. So they were trying to form their own dynasty to be bigger.
Well, I think so. And with Harry's book coming out, Spare, where the front cover makes him look like a Neanderthalic man, really, a Cro-Magnon man. He looks completely void of any personality or any worth, any self-worth. And that's deeply concerning, because here was a young lad who was always grabbing, you know, the headlines. He was always, like, not so much that, you know, he was always the one that everyone went, oh, Harry. He was the people's favourite, you know?
Well, put it this way, our viewers want them stripped of their titles.
Yeah,
one of them even says, can we strip them of their passports as well? I don't know if we can do that, but that's what one of our viewers has said.
But that just seems so sad, because when I look at it, I see a couple, I think he's besotted with her. And, you know, let's see what happens. And I think the palace are right to never explain, never complain. I wish they would do the same. And let's face it, which family hasn't had a big breakup?
Cameron Walker, thank you very much indeed for joining us and giving us the latest on the Harry and Meghan soap opera. Now, coming up, Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen caused a stir this week when he called for the government to immediately halt the use of mRNA vaccines for COVID-19. We'll be joined by him after the break.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 11:24. Now, we've got your views in front of us here. Les said, I couldn't agree more with Joanne Lumley and Claire Fox's comments. She was spot on as usual. She always speaks common sense. Young women will soon be scared stiff by any innocent interactions with men if they think a wolf whistle can lead to serious assault.
Loads and loads of comments about this. Fiona said, I'm a Yorkshire lass, so I've always been tough. Well said, Fiona. Leave men alone and stop demonising them with patriarchy nonsense.
And on a different story, Dan said, how pathetic is Harry? He was in the army for 10 years and supposedly saw action, but he was terrified at William shouting at him. It goes from bizarre to ridiculous. Good point, that, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. Thank you. Keep those views coming in.
Now, the Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen called for the government to immediately halt the use of mRNA vaccines for COVID-19, claiming that they are not safe, not effective and not necessary.
He went on to compare the blind eye turn to vaccine harms to the cover-up of Jimmy Savile's sex crimes. Andrew Bridgen joins us now. Andrew, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Now, you said that the mRNA vaccine was not safe, not effective and not needed. They're three different allegations in many respects. Are you saying that the vaccine does more harm than good? Or are you saying that, you know, it's not safe, it's not safe at all? You know, or is it just a question that for many people it's a good thing, but for just a small number of people it does harm? What exactly was the point you were making about it?
What I'm making, the point is, if you look at Pfizer's own data, when they developed the vaccine, you're looking at least 1 in 800 of the recipients having a serious harmful effect as a result of the vaccine. And when you compare that to the risk from COVID-19, especially the Omicron variant, which is basically a bad cold, the risk benefits of vaccination, even at quite high age groups, is very questionable. Certainly at younger age groups, there's no doubt at all that they shouldn't be administered. Clearly, I mean, someone's making an awful lot of money out of these vaccines, and it needs to be exposed. I mean, this is going against medical ethics, and it's going against the science. The data is very, very clear from the yellow card submissions. Over 500,000 since the rollout of the vaccines, and of course, you know, incidences of 1 in 100,000 harms have stopped previous vaccines from being administered.
No, I don't know if the data is as clear as you say there, and I think this is coming out at the moment. But is it really your big beef against Big Pharma? Because you sort of talked about them a lot and their control over basically people's minds, the medical industry minds, government minds, young medical students' minds. Where were you focusing your argument and your debate on?
Well, how this could have happened in the first place. That, I mean, if you actually look at the data produced by Pfizer, you know, it's very doubtful that these so-called vaccines should actually have got approval for use at all. I mean, obviously, we're in a desperate situation some time ago. They're on emergency use. One of the reasons I think they're actually still on emergency use, because I don't think anyone could say that we're in an emergency situation with COVID-19 now, is I think if they were actually on general usage, the rules about monitoring the harms and the side effects would be such that they would be probably withdrawn immediately.
But they were on emergency use, as it were, because we were in an emergency and we were doing it at pace. So we know that there was a difference there, Phil.
Yeah, you also, Andrew, made a serious allegation about the British Heart Foundation in your speech. You said that a senior person there had sent out non-disclosure agreements to his research team to ensure the data about the harm caused never sees the light of day. I mean, could you not have used parliamentary privilege to name this person? Because some people might think, well, with just making sort of thrashing around without a name, it rather undermines the accusation.
Well, I was using parliamentary privilege, and I do have to be careful. I'm not suggesting necessarily that the British Heart Foundation even know about this research, but certainly a whistleblower has given me information that someone very closely associated with the British Heart Foundation, has carried out research which showed a very strong link between heart inflammation and the vaccine, and that report has been suppressed. I think we'll hear more about this story over the next few days, Philip. I don't really want to delve any further into it at the moment.
OK, well, I should just say that the British Heart Foundation did issue a statement that says, "We do not recognise these claims and strongly refute all allegations made about colleagues in senior leadership roles within the British Heart Foundation. As a trusted provider of heart health information, we are committed to being completely independent and take great care to be accurate and transparent with all public health information. We would encourage those making these serious allegations to share specific, credible information with us which supports them. The British Heart Foundation's advice on vaccines is based on rigorous scrutiny of the latest evidence, which to date shows that the benefits of receiving the COVID-19 vaccine greatly outweigh the risk of extremely rare side effects for the vast majority of people." Might you be able to share any of that information that you've got with the British Heart Foundation as they're asking?
I'll give it some consideration. I do know more than that, and the whistleblower was someone who was asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the research. So we'll take it forward from there. It will be in the public interest, and there'll be considerable interest in this. And clearly, if I'm correct, that report needs to be produced. Perhaps someone will produce the report in due course. I think it will be fascinating. But at the end of the day, the big drug companies have huge control over our institutions because they're funding the research. And the old saying that he who pays the piper calls the tune, I think is very, very true. I mean, Pfizer will have made, the figures I saw, $45 billion out of their vaccine, almost half of their worldwide profits last year. That is some considerable clout in the pharmaceutical industry.
Andrew Bridgen, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. It seems to me he's doing some sort of whistleblower's case there. He said you'll hear more in the next couple of days. And I think we'll be intrigued to know what that is.
I wonder if the whistleblower...
Big Pharma, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but
do you think he's tapping
these things are not helpful at all. I wonder who the whistleblower is, if it is one of his constituents, because as far as I'm concerned, you should be leading your constituency and dealing with those pressures and those issues that present. And I'm just a bit concerned that he's not doing that. Who's telling him this information?
Well, as an MP, he's entitled to raise matters of national concern as well as just local concerns, isn't it? I mean, that's what he's part of.
But put it this way, if he hasn't got this information to substantiate his claims, he is the one who's going to pay the price there. So we're getting told this is the start of what could be a very, very big story.
But listen, I think we need to untangle certain things. I think that vaccine harms have not been given enough publicity. That's a perfectly reasonable point. And I think the government, probably rather defensively, because they wanted people to take the vaccine, didn't want to draw attention to any harms. I think it's reasonable for Andrew to say we want to have a risk-benefit analysis in terms of the age profiling. But he's actually gone further than that, because he's actually said that the vaccine shouldn't be used and then launched an attack on Big Pharma. I'm much more suspicious of that. Let's put it this way. Every medical intervention's got a risk. I mean, I remember, HRT, don't take it, you'll die. Some people do have adverse reactions to medical interventions. I also think that Big Pharma is an essential part of medical scientific breakthroughs that are going to be helping us cure cancer, dementia and everything else. So I don't want to write them all off because of this. So I think we just got to untangle a few things here.
And I think that was sort of my concern with it. Which bit, which was I was trying to get to. Which bit is it the big pharma? Is it that you should have had 1 or 2 vaccinations? The fact you're doing 3, 4, 5. I mean, which bit was he saying? Was it about their profits linked to it? Was it they had too much say, or was it that they weren't safe?
Well, he certainly stimulated a healthy debate. Anyway, we can say that. I'm sure we can all agree about that. Anyway, coming up, we'll be joined by journalist Philip Norman to talk about his autobiography and his time spent with the likes of Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Colonel Gaddafi and Liz Taylor. But first, here's the headlines with the lovely Rhiannon.
Philip, thank you. It's 11:34, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Passengers travelling by train are being disrupted by a fresh round of strikes today. Members of the UK's biggest rail union, the RMT, have walked off the job for 48 hours. That's after talks failed to resolve a dispute over pay and conditions. Services across the UK are severely disrupted, with no trains at all running in some areas. Passengers are being urged not to travel unless absolutely necessary. 4 people are in a critical condition after a suspected crowd crush at a music venue in South London. Police were called to the Brixton O2 Academy last night following reports a large number of people were trying to force their way into a concert. The Met Police has launched an investigation and plans to review CCTV images of the incident. The Prime Minister says he's working flat out to try and restore the power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland. Rishi Sunak's in Belfast meeting Stormont's political leaders in his first visit as Prime Minister. Whilst there, he's also promoting the government's investment in shipbuilding in the city. British retailers recorded a drop in sales last month. That's despite online discounts and Christmas shopping. The Office for National Statistics says the volume of sales went down by 0.4%. It follows a rise of 0.9% in October. But they also say department stores did report an increase in sales, with a longer period of Black Friday offers helping. And hundreds of schools and sixth form colleges will soon receive funding to replace dilapidated classrooms. The Education Secretary says 500 sites will be given overhauls as part of their school rebuilding programme. Gillian Keegan says the rebuilds will be environmentally sustainable, with some schools receiving triple glazing heat pumps and solar panels. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2187 and €1.1474. The price of gold is £1,462.60 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,327 points.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
To 12, got your views here.
I read out earlier lots of views of people opposed to the strike. So for the purposes of balance, John here is a member of the RMT, and he said the RMT members are rock solid in the action they're taking and in support of Mick Lynch. The government has forced these strikes. The RMT cancelled strikes after the death of the Queen, then called off other strikes for the Royal British Legion, and then further strikes to force a negotiation. We're defending our industry from dangerous cuts to safety standards, maintenance regimes and the workforce. We don't have public sector pensions, and we will defend the public from unsafe work practices that will take us back to the days of rail track. So that's some balance from
Now, Claire, I thought the RMT were being way too militant. You've seen others saying, do you know what, we've negotiated a settlement, TSSA, and other ones, and Unite are saying, OK, we can do that. That works for our workers, that works for us. But RMT, they seem to be the most militant, not helping themselves.
Well, there's always a danger if you're kind of hard line, which actually could be interpreted as principled, that you actually get the blame or you get seen as... I heard an item earlier where they're all kind of militants and trying to bring the government down. I don't think that's entirely fair. I think that being stalwart in defence of your members' interests is something to look at positively. But I do actually think there probably is some waning support. And I thought that there was a tone-deaf bit where they introduced those two later strikes, you know, the ones just before Christmas.
Yes.
I think that actually they might have got that wrong myself, because there's been quite a lot of sympathy. So, look, I just want people to stand up for themselves and not be passive.
Yeah.
They're not playing the victim card, which, as we've been slagging off victimhood as a kind of negotiating tool, at least they're kind of being a bit more...
I was going to ask another question, though. You know, if you're talking about people aren't as resilient and robust, do you even think strikers aren't as resilient and robust as they might have been in the past? Do you think them falling away from the picket line where it's cold, they're not getting the money, do you think that's a different age, a different era for striking?
I think it's certainly not the 1970s. I mean, people who sort of go, it's like the winter of discontent, you think, God, no, that was continual, perpetual strike action all the time. These are actually rather limited strike interventions by different people. I'm simply saying the notion of standing up for yourself via a union is one I support wholeheartedly, and then you could have quibbles about whether you'd go back to work or not.
I agree with what Claire's just said, but public opinion, I think, is waning because the way it's reported in the because it is the way that it's being reported in the news, it's pitting people against people, and that's what I can't stand.
Yeah,
and it's the narrative of politics and all of this as well. There needs a strong government to sort this out. That is the bottom line.
Claire, the two Claires, Muldoon and Foxy, we'll have you back on any time. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, from interviews with Bob Dylan to the Beatles, Johnny Cash to Liz Taylor, Fleetwood Mac, even to President Gaddafi, our next guest has spoken to them all.
In his brand new book titled We Dance on Our Desks, a sight to behold, Philip Norman documents working on the Sunday Times magazine at the height of its popularity in the 60s and 70s, and we're delighted to say he joins us now. Philip, I want to know your best stories with a list of names like that, who you've knocked about with. Come on, spill the beans. Tell us your best moments.
Well, you did knock around with them. Today, celebrity interviews are like half an hour in a hotel room. But in those days, because the Sunday Times magazine had such a name and was considered so fashionable, you could spend a lot of time with people. So when I went to interview Stevie Wonder in New York, his brother, they were going to Philadelphia that day, he and his brother. His brother Milton said, would you take care of Stevie for the day? And of course, I said yes. I took care of Stevie and even acted his kind of minder for a while. When I left that night to go back to New York, I was worried about who was going to look after Stevie.
Now, you've done all these biographies of all these wonderful, famous people, and now you've turned your hand to an autobiography. How difficult was it doing an autobiography? A friend of mine says that the trouble with doing an autobiography is that it's a lot harder to be honest in an autobiography than it is in a biography. Did you find that difficult?
Well, no, because I've written both a novel and an autobiography about my early years. I was brought up on a seaside pier in the Isle of Wight, where I never learnt to even swim, let alone go sailing. So my first assignment for the Sunday Times magazine was to interview Francis Chichester, who was about to circumnavigate the world in Gypsy Moth 4. I didn't find it at all. No, I didn't find it at all. I don't find it hard to confess my complete cock-ups occasionally, which there are many in my book. Because if you're honest, you're invulnerable, I think. Politicians should learn the same lesson.
And absolutely they should. With the title, We Danced on Our Desks, what's that alluding to?
Well, we had this wonderful editor called Godfrey Smith, who was like a character out of Pickwick Papers, who just loved throwing parties and taking us to lunch and dinner and taking us away for the week, all of us, the staff, all the executive staff. But the big event of the year was Godfrey's Christmas party, which was the hottest ticket in London at that time. Celebrities fighting to get to the Sunday Times magazine's Christmas party. And under Godfrey's order, all the desks were pushed together in the concourse, and that was the disco floor. We danced on our desks every Christmas.
Philip, how did you get to come to speak to Colonel Gaddafi?
Well, I first of all went to Libya, which was a lot easier than it is today, and I waited around for about 2 weeks. And by some strange chemistry, I met the only hippie that was in Libya at the time, who turned out to be a very bosom buddy of Colonel Gaddafi. So after a while, I was taken to meet Gaddafi in the military barracks in Tripoli. But although he spoke English, Gaddafi spoke English, because like many despots, he'd been trained by the British Army. The interview was in Arabic, and it was translated by the only hippie in Libya. So he would say things like, Colonel Gaddafi says that bombing refugee camps is so not cool. So I had to convert that back when I wrote my interview into sort of normal English.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure that the book is available in all good bookshops. We wish you well. And Philip, what an amazing career interviewing and writing biographies about some amazing people. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us this morning.
I mean, everybody, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, you name it.
Holly,
yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Anyway, this Sunday, it's the World Cup final as Argentina take on defending champions France, who have the chance to win back-to-back World Cups to join the exclusive club alongside Italy and Brazil. But is this Messi's time to shine? Here to talk us through his former Arsenal striker and pundit Kevin Campbell. Kevin, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So let's hear your prediction for Sunday's World Cup. Who's going to win, Argentina or France?
Very, very interesting game. Obviously, Lionel Messi, we know how good he is. This is his last World Cup, his last World Cup game. He's been absolutely sensational throughout the tournament. And I think that the people want Messi to get his World Cup. But France are a different kettle of fish. France are very good. And it seems to be the old best player in the world against probably the new best player in Mbappe, who plays for France. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting.
What did you make of England's performance in the World Cup? The quarterfinals, they lost to France. I mean, some people say, well, no real big shame in doing that, but you leave with the impression that they still underachieved in the tournament, don't you?
Well, you do in a sense, because you know what talent is there. I think it's the way we went out. You know, the team performed pretty well, and it's the way we went out. Harry Kane stepped up. You know, he missed a penalty, but he scored one, missed one. It can happen. There were certain things that went on in the game where you could say there was probably another opportunity to get a penalty. France's first goal, was there a foul on Saka? But look, it's gone now. I think considering where England were before they went into this tournament, they hadn't performed very well. This just goes to show the players and the manager are tournament people. Now, there ain't a lot wrong in what's going on with England. So, you know, a quarter-final, a semi-final, a final in the Euros, etc. I think England have done okay, but we've got a little way to go.
Is it the end for Gareth Southgate?
I hope not, if I'm honest. I hope Gareth Southgate takes stock of what's gone on and maybe adds somebody to his backroom staff with a little bit more experience. Because, you know, some of those games, it can change on just one decision. And it seems to be, it always goes against us. So getting somebody with a bit more experience in might just help England get over the line and get that much-needed trophy.
Kevin Campbell, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Football legend, Arsenal legend, Kevin Campbell, thank you very much indeed for your time.
I thought you were going to tell him the story about you seeing him a long, long time ago, and it was like 6 goals.
He did.
Arsenal youth against Doncaster
Rovers in the FA Youth Cup final when Doncaster Rovers miraculously got there but lost 6-1 to Arsenal. And I think Kevin Campbell scored, if he didn't score all 6, I think he scored 5 of them. Amazing player. Brilliant to have him on the show.
Well, as we do at the end of our show, we get the latest showbiz news with Sarah Robinson. So she is here. So come on, tell us what's happening in the world of showbiz.
In the world of showbiz, well, quite dramatic this week. Boris Becker has been released from prison 8 months into a 2.5-year sentence. So he's been discharged. He's gone back to Germany. He's been deported back to Germany. He will not be coming back to Britain again. And I have been told from friends that he's currently lining up a big tell-all TV interview about his experiences. And actually, it was interesting because it was reported yesterday that he was discharged and had gone back to Germany, just, as I say, 8 months from a 2.5-year sentence. But actually, my friends told me on Wednesday that he'd already left on Tuesday, so he was already out of prison earlier than what we knew. And
because some of us in the news were wondering if it was Friday, there was uncertainty. So was this special treatment for somebody who was famous?
Maybe, but he was gone. So I went to meet some friends of Boris's for lunch on Wednesday, and they said, "Oh, just to let you know, he's left. He's out of prison. He's away back to Germany."
A tell-all TV documentary. Wonder where we got that idea from.
Well, it's obviously the money.
What does this? Are these friends going to appear on the documentary? Are they going to be endorsing everything he said?
I don't think so. No, I think they probably want to keep a bit of a distance. But you know, they know I'm a showbiz journalist, so they like to keep me up to date with all what's going on. But it is interesting that he, you know, did only have, you know, such a short time in jail for what was a very serious offence. He hid £2.5 million worth of assets when he went bankrupt, and you know,
it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Didn't serve his time, really, did he? And he was in a low-security prison as well.
Yeah,
it was very low security.
People get annoyed at people being released automatically halfway through the sentence. He didn't get even anywhere close to serving at least half of his sentence. I mean, it does look like some kind of special treatment.
Deported and sent back to his own country.
Yes, yes. So there you go.
On,
So moving on from Boris, we wish him a nice Christmas, a nice German Christmas, and on to Strictly. It's the Strictly Come Dancing final tomorrow. I'm so excited about this.
More than the World Cup final.
This is my final. I know. You like your football, Phil. I love my dancing, and Strictly is my favourite show. Favourite show. It's just brilliant. So yes, but there's been a little bit of controversy about that because the 4 couples that are in the show, 3 of them are doing their couples' choices, and people have said they need to change the rules for next year because it's not fair that they're getting to do effectively what's 2 show dances in the show. So some fans have taken umbrage with this and said that there needs to be a rule change for next year. And I think part of it as well is Fleur East. She got the highest mark for her couple's choice, which was the Destiny's Child Megamix for the Blackpool week, and Craig gave her a 10. So she got 40. She got top marks for that. She's going to be rolling that out again.
Are we glazing here, Phil?
Tomorrow night. Phil's lost interest now, hasn't he? He doesn't...
I was thinking who might be the first goal scorer in the World Cup final.
Phil, I bet you're a bit of a one on the dance floor, aren't you?
You're joking, aren't you? No,
Really?
Two left feet, yeah.
Esther, is that right?
Absolutely it is.
Does he just do like a dad dance, like a bit of a shimmy?
I'm not even sure I can do that.
Really?
It's worse.
Esther's good, though. She puts me to shame.
Yes, Esther, you've
I don't put him to shame. I try not to be on the dance floor with him.
Oh, so you just pretend not to know him? Like, I don't know that man. I don't know who that strange person
She does that all the time. It's not just on the dance floor. She does
Phil.
that a lot.
No, that's rubbish. No, I don't do that. I just dance with other people.
Yeah.
Oh, Phil, it's dead easy. You just need the proper teaching.
Are you offering?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, there you go, dancing lessons.
Yeah.
And what else if you're not into the Strictly Dancing?
Yes, well, of course, we have to finish on the Royals. I mean, come on, it's probably the biggest showbiz story of the decade, isn't it? What's going on from Montecito and between, you know, the royal family here? Let's just say the channels are frozen completely.
OK, you're somebody who obviously knows the in and out workings of sort of PR and people telling stories and... Now, I would have always thought if you've got a comms team and a press team, they're constantly talking about new stories that are coming. That's how you move the news agenda on. They do that in politics, doing this today, that today, whatever. They do it in any organisation. I'm quite sure the royal family, today we've got sort of Meghan, tomorrow we've got Kate, then we've got whatever. So this notion that stories were told against her, is this just rubbish? This is just how they move the agenda on.
Well, the irony is all the stories that were kept out about them. You know, to keep... So there were stories that was kept out, and they're going on saying, oh, all these stories were planted. Yeah. But they're not saying, actually, lots of stories were kept out of the press because the Royal Communications team were trying to do their best to help them and not
Well, they didn't want to tell that side. They were protected by the royal family very much.
Sarah, they've got to earn that money.
I tell you, you tell us, you keep us informed on everything. They were protected by the royal family. Look, what a day, what a show we've had, Phil. It's been great, Sarah. It's been great. But coming up next is the wonderful Andrew Pearce. So see all of you tomorrow at 10 and don't go anywhere.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update. A frosty Friday out there with snow falling across parts of Scotland. Most of England and Wales will be dry today, but it is cold once more. That is about to change. Here's the bigger picture. High pressure is actually moving in across the south, but these weather fronts have been providing a mixture of rain, sleet and snow across parts of Scotland and making for some treacherous conditions first thing this morning over parts of Scotland through the central belt. Snow falling for a time before turning back to rain as we go through the day. But we could see a fair few centimetres in some locations, certainly up over the mountains of western Scotland, several centimetres expected. Much of Northern Ireland dry, but some rain showers across the north. Most of England and Wales dry. Some fog around this morning as well. That will take a while to clear, but then plenty of sunshine. But temperatures yet again struggling to get much above 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. Now, wintry weather continues across parts of Scotland. More and more turning to rain at low levels, certainly, but more snow over the higher routes here, and everything could freeze up through this evening, so it may well turn icy. And we'll see a few more showers just drifting into southern Scotland, then northern England overnight. So again, it could be icy. It's going to be a cold evening if you're heading out tonight. Temperatures by morning, again, well below freezing across England and Wales. A little milder further north, where we'll have more cloud. But still some showers coming in. And we'll have those outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow over northern England and North Wales during Saturday. Again, most of the snow on the hills, but some is possible at lower levels. Mostly rain, though, at lower levels. Snow coming in across the Highlands of Scotland throughout Saturday, but much of eastern Scotland and much of the Midlands, South Wales, southern England, dry and fine during tomorrow. Temperatures a little higher, 4, 5, maybe 7 or 8 across the southwest, and milder areas on the way for Sunday. This area of low pressure is moving in. It's going to lift the temperatures, but it is also going to bring some wet weather, and we could see a spell of heavy snow. See the Met Office website for the warnings.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all,